This data set contains three columns of data. Column A shows us the name for each of a number of cities. Column B shows us the number of people living in each of those cities. And finally, column C shows us the number of murders committed in each of those cities in a given year. Now, obviously, some of these cities have much larger populations than others do, and you would expect cities with larger populations to have more murders. There are just more people, so more people means more murders. To get an idea of how much risk there is of murder in a given city, we need to compute a rate. Let's begin by typing a heading here in column D. How about murders per 100,000 people? And it probably would be a good idea to stretch that column out and make room for that rather long heading. And it might be good to boldface it as well, like the other headings. Just highlight it, click the B there, or you can use Control B on your keyboard. And there we have a nice column heading. Let's start by trying a simple rate. I'm going to type an equal sign and then a left parenthesis, and then come over to column C2 and divide that by B2, the population, and hit enter. And what we get is a really small number, scientific notation for a really small number, way less than 1. So what this is telling us is there's less than 1 murder per person in Albuquerque here, the first entry. And that's just not a terribly intuitive way to do this. It's kind of difficult to imagine less than 1 murder. So let's take another approach. Starting again, equal sign, a left parenthesis, dividing C2 by B2, the number of murders by the population, and now let's multiply by 100,000, and then hit enter. And now we get something a little easier to understand. We can see now that there are about 7.5 murders per 100,000 people in Albuquerque. So it's a little bit easier to picture maybe 100,000 people and then imagine about 7.5 murders per every group of 100,000 people. Now let's copy that formula down the column so we'll repeat that calculation for every other city in the data set. I'm highlighting the cell with the formula, Control C on the keyboard, use my mouse to highlight the cells underneath that I want to copy it to, and Control V on the keyboard, and that pastes that formula in there. Now it really doesn't make a lot of sense to talk about 7.537 and so forth murders, because you can't really have 7 murders and then a part of another murder per 100,000 people. So why don't we change these numbers to whole numbers? I'm going to highlight the entire column by clicking on the top, right-clicking and choosing Format Cells, and then looking around here for, let's see, there it is, number. And then changing the decimal places to 0, and then finally clicking OK. And so now we have something that makes a little more sense. We have in Albuquerque here in cell D2 we have 8 murders per 100,000 people, and right below that we have Anaheim, California, with 2 murders per 100,000 people. And so now you can see how we can begin to compare these cities a little more intuitively. Now, as every journalist knows, extremes are newsworthy. So now that we have computed each city's murder rate per 100,000 people, it would make sense to perhaps sort the data by the murder rate column and be able to find out which cities have the highest murder rates and which ones have the lowest murder rates. You've already seen how to do a sort. Let's begin by clicking in the upper left corner to highlight all the data, and click Data, the Data tab, and choose the Sort button. And let's have it sort by the murders per 100,000 people column right there, and let's sort from highest to lowest, and click OK. And there we go. You can see that New Orleans came out on top with 44 murders per 100,000 people, followed by Detroit with 41 murders per 100,000 people, and so forth down the line. So now we have a sense of which of these cities have the highest murder rates. And next, let's add some rankings here. Let's start by typing a column heading in column E, rank. Let's make it boldface just like we did the other ones. Just highlight the column heading and click B here on the home menu, or Control B on your keyboard. And to get the rank, I'm going to type a 1 and a 2 here in these first two cells of the column, highlight them, and then grab the little box to the lower right of what I've highlighted, drag it down the column, and when I let up, you see I get a nice set of ranking numbers, 1, 2, and 3, and so forth, with a 1 indicating the city, New Orleans, with the most murders per 100,000, and then going on down the column. Now, this isn't perfect. Notice that two of the cities here, Detroit and Washington, D.C., both have identical murder rates per 100,000 people. Both of them have 41 murders per 100,000 people. So it's a bit unfair to Detroit, for example, to say that it ranks number 2 and Washington ranks number 3 when in fact they have identical murder rates. So there would be some manual adjustment needed here. You might rank both of them as 2s, for example. But the automatically produced rank gives us at least a general idea of where the cities fall in relation to each other. Now, some of the cities in this data set have populations so large that those cities are really kind of in a class by themselves. And it might be a good idea to see what happens if we focus the analysis just on those cities that are just really huge. So we can do that by setting a filter on the data for cities with populations of, let's say, larger than 1 million people. Here's how to do that. Begin by using your mouse to click on any cell that has data in it. I'm going to just pick A1 here. And then on the Data tab, I'm going to click this filter icon. It looks like a little funnel. And when I do that, these little down arrows appear at the top of each column. Now the column we want to filter by is the population column, column B. So I'm going to click the down arrow at the top of column B. And when I do, I can come down here and choose number filters, and then also greater than. And then I'm going to set the filter to filter for cases where the population column is greater than 1 million, and click OK. And you see what it's done. It has filtered out all the other data, and we have just the 10 or so cities that have population figures greater than 1 million. Now if I take my mouse and highlight all of this filtered data, right-click and choose Copy, then I can come down here and click on Sheet 2, and get myself a blank worksheet, and right-click and choose Paste Special and Values. Click OK, and I get a copy of the data for just those 10 cities. Now I probably want to fix column D here. We have lots of decimal places again, so I'm just going to reset that to numbers with 0 decimal points, just like I did earlier. And it might be good to create a second rank, one just for these 10 cities. Let's call this rank 2 here in column F. And then again, type a 1 and a 2, highlight the 1 and the 2, grab the little box in lower right with the mouse and drag down, and we get a nice ranking 1 through 10, showing the which of these 10 megacities in the U.S. has the highest murder rate. Turns out to be Chicago with 23 murders per 100,000 people. And the city with the lowest murder rate, the megacity with the lowest murder rate, San Diego, with about 4 murders per 100,000 people, and the other cities arrayed in between.